Hey everyone, welcome to Saturday Night Popcorn. This is Jason.
And this is Kai. We have a great discussion for you today. The movie of the day is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I just want to give everyone a heads up. Spoiler warning, we're going to maybe not go too in depth into the movie, but we will discuss a good majority of what occurs in the movie.
Yeah, and we also want to kind of give a general background of planes, trains, and automobiles. We use this letterbox app where we kind of like log the movies, we write reviews, we kind of give them a rating. It's a good way to kind of we share movie lists for each other and stuff, just to show that what we're watching, what we watch on our own time, what we watch for this podcast. This will kind of make you know that we watch a lot of movies. But Planes, Trains, and Automobiles came out in 1987. So I was not alive. I'm assuming Kai was not alive either.
No.
My older brother, was 1 year old at that time. But it was also directed by John Hughes. And the two main characters are played by Steve Martin and John Candy. Steve Martin and John Candy, I think anybody can point them out. John Candy nowadays, sadly, he passed away. I think somewhere in the 90s, I believe.
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of people probably that don't recognize John Candy or don't even know John Candy films. But Steve Martin is still alive and kicking right now, so
Yeah.
he's still
He's on
making
one
a
of
lot
my
of good
favorite
things.
shows right now.
Which one?
Only Murders in This Building.
I was gonna say that one's like a tangent of that. That one is like a show you can watch. It's quick, 30-minute episodes, but it's like it's a who done it
Hmm.
type of show where it's like it just kind of latches onto you and you kind of run with it. But let's talk about planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah.
We both watched it yesterday. We can confirm that.
Yes.
Yesterday, Friday, November 4th. But what'd you think about it? What'd you like about it?
I liked it. So the thing about it was there's a movie called Due Date with Zach Galifianakis and Robert Downey Jr. And I love that's one of my favorite movies. Like when it was in the theaters, I watched it like two or three times. And then every few months I'll watch it at home. So as I'm watching Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, I'm like, oh, this is the 80s version of that. So I was dying. I loved it.
Huh? I don't think I've ever seen Due Date myself, but it's probably something that we should put it on our list at my
You
own home
should.
because my girlfriend loves Robert Downey Jr. But
I
but
think
I loved it too. It was a fun. I felt like I laughed more often than not in
mhm,
this movie from this movie than any of like the recent like funny movies, quote unquote, like the ones that were supposed to be funny.
yeah.
Who doesn't like a traditional buddy film where they have some arguments, they have some laughs and stuff, but then end up at the same place together at the end?
I I kind of want you and Patty to watch Due Date tonight so we can talk about both of these together. Because as I'm watching it, like the ridiculousness. So basically, Due Date is Robert Downey Jr. is Steve Martin, Zach Galifianakis is John Candy, and just how everything plays out in Due Date almost matches what happens in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Like the wife is at home. They're trying to get back, or the one character's trying to get back home to spend time with the family, and it's just insaneness after insaneness occurring.
Huh. I guess it kind of goes to the greater discussion. Excuse me. The greater discussion of that a lot of the movie industry right now is remaking things, but
Yeah,
kind of in the same light. But sometimes you get some gems where due date can be a very like or like a remake can be a very good
that's
uh
amazing.
homage to the if they're actually not even like saying that, oh, this is like a remake. It's like sort of like the buddy films are like sort of the same story just in different lights or different people, different um and all that stuff. So it's like you can make two of the same films, but they could be completely different and still kind of hit the same funny bones for most people.
Yeah, like it didn't feel like a remake. It felt more like a homage. After watching Planes, Trains, and knowing since I've seen Due Date too many times to count, It really felt more like a homage than a remake.
Okay,
But
interesting. So maybe that is on the docket tonight.
yeah, that whole the whole scene when they're in the car, planes, trains, not due date. I'll get off that tangent. Uh, when they're in the car and John Candy throws a cigarette and he thinks it goes outside and ends up in the backseat, and then whole car catches on fire is hilarious.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of points in that whole scene where like just John Candy kind of riffing like the song while he's like driving by himself, or like Steve Martin's character is sleeping. Everyone
Yeah,
knows that if you've taken a long kind of like road trip. I do road trips back and forth from where I live back to California and stuff, and it sometimes the person that's next to you is supposed to be your driving partner but falls asleep. So
yep.
you kind of got yourself you got to get yourself all hyped up and everything and ready to go for that long drive. And so I typically sometimes I find myself either really invested in like the podcast that I'm playing or something, or music and stuff, just to kind of keep yourself awake and motivated to keep driving. So that was a pretty funny, and it's like a traditional John Candy where he's in this role, but he was the funny guy.
Yeah, just the most ridiculous man in the world. Like the whole like the what was it the first hotel where he showers first and just throws stuff in the sink, throws stuff all over the freaking bathroom. And Steve Martin's just like, dude, what? There's one little towel left, and it's like, come
One
on,
little
man.
tiny towel, and then he blows up what a six pack of beer while like having the bed shake and
Oh
everything.
my goodness.
But yeah, those scenes are hilarious, and it's like the whole concept, and if no one knows, the whole thing is that John Candy's character is a salesman, a traditional salesman of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where they go door to door, business to business, but he is in the realm of selling shower curtain rings. And where Steve Martin's character is this marketing person who starts off the movie starts off in like a board meeting of the CEO staring at uh at marketing kind of like what would you call it, like examples
Yeah.
of
Like
their next
ad
marketing thing.
examples.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ad examples. And so they're all sitting there. It's like a day or two before
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. Everyone's trying to get to a flight or whatever. Uh, the one side note of that, I was thinking sitting there, I was like, do you think that's like a real representation of like what our parents or anybody of that generation like actually experience of like a CEO like not caring as to whether or not like a holiday is like the next day? Because I feel like all those like there's all these stories of like the Santa Claus movies comes to mind where Tim Allen is like this character that like has to fight with their like boss to like get the day off for Christmas,
Yeah.
because that their boss is that traditional person that like who cares about Christmas, who cares about the family stuff, like we got to make money. And it's like you kind of wonder, it's like how did that happen quite often back then?
I think it did. Cause like even like places I've worked before, I've had that guilt of like, uh-oh, can I take a day off? Like I know I have something important to do, but is it cool if I take a day off? So I can see that definitely being true back then.
That is true. I think it's also to the and this is uh just anybody's understanding of the American workforce and stuff. Like a lot of times you are oftentimes guilted into like, oh, do you want to take a day off? Or the some people don't even take days off when they're sick. We all know that before
Yeah.
this whole situation and stuff. But it is funny just seeing that representation, and then do you wonder if these top notch CEOs back at that time or even nowadays sit around and watch movies, and it's like we're making fun of CEOs because like they're like these emotionless people and like don't care about holidays or their workforce and stuff. But it's like you wonder like I'm cool. I thought I'm cool. I thought I'm like I give high five
I'm
to
an
my buddy or something.
easygoing kind of guy. Come
Right.
on.
but but back to the story, it's like they are days before Thanksgiving. And so Steve Martin's character is trying to get home from New York to Chicago. And it's
Yeah.
funny because the ticket that they showed in the beginning of the movie it said he took off at 6 o'clock p.m. and then it
Hmm.
landed at 6:45 p.m. Unless I read that
It's close.
incorrectly.
No, no,
Yeah, I
no.
know that's right,
Well,
right?
well, because they might lose an hour too.
Okay, okay. I
Because
was
it
like
might be
confused.
like East, like whatever East time zone versus
Mountain time or whatever. Like,
Midwest.
yeah.
Yeah. So they may
Okay,
lose an hour. I know it's a quick
true.
flight though.
Yeah, but okay, so then they're trying to get, and so like there's this whole thing of like trying to get a cab after everyone's getting off of work, trying to get to the airport. That's a bunch of nonsense. And then they get to the airport, and then there's a giant blizzard in Chicago, as every single movie that is based in Chicago is
Yeah.
like there's
So that's
always
the
an
part that got me about it. Because, like, okay, you are in Chicago. You know how bad the weather gets, especially during the holidays. You know you should leave at least a couple days before you expect to leave. Because
right.
the sun always gonna come and tear up your whole holiday.
That's true. Yeah, because you would think if like that person, like granted, like up here in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of people are just dealing with like a bunch of rain and you just kind of deal with that and all
Yeah.
that. But yeah, it's true. It's like you kind of like, why test your luck when you're trying to get home to see your family for a possibly important holiday, and you try to leave like within the hour of getting off of work and head to the airport. That's true. I never thought about that.
Poor time management.
but but yeah, that's the point of the story. It's like it's the story is these two people, they get stuck with each other trying to get to the airport, seeing that their plane is canceled, and then trying to figure out how to get to Chicago. I want to ask you one question, because my girlfriend and I were asking the same question throughout the whole movie. Is do you think John Candy's character legitimately stole the taxi in the beginning of the movie from Steve Martin?
uh, that's a good question. I think it was. I think the taxi driver just wanted a passenger quick. So I don't think it was something he tried to do. I think it just happened. I think Steve Martin looked away long enough for John Candy to start shoving his stuff in the trunk of that taxi, and then he was off.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Or I thought it was gonna like become like this like large kind of story arc that like down the road you find out that like, oh, he actually did legitimately stole the
Yeah,
taxi and everything.
like
But
a
it kind of never.
flashback and everything.
Yeah, right. Or like that's like where the big argument or the big climax of the movie comes from, where it's like, oh, they like you actually did steal my taxi, but nothing comes of it. Nothing happens from it. So
Yeah,
but yeah, and then they get into like the whole reason why the movie's called Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is that they use pretty much every mode of transportation trying to get to Chicago.
just pure chaos though.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness.
It's
Because
like
once they were in the plane, I was like, oh, they got it. He's getting home.
yeah, and then they're diverted, and I don't fly enough to like be diverted to somewhere
Yeah.
that like I typically when I fly, the ticket tells me where I'm going and I get there. And so
Well, I
there's
never
only
go to the
one
East
time
Coast during
it,
like blizzard time, so
right?
I've
I
never
don't
dealt with
know.
that.
Yeah, I've never dealt with that. Like the only time where I was like I didn't know if I was gonna make my plane, or like the typical running through the airport and everything was I was flying to Mexico and I had to stop off in Texas. And then you find out that Texas, I figured it was Houston, I think. Houston's airport is like gigantic.
Yeah.
And they were like, you have to get from here all the way to the other end. And so that's like that typical where you're running through the airport trying to make your next flight. But that's the only excitement that I like driving around. If I have a favorite mode of transportation, it's driving. I have like a slight uneasiness with flying, and so I choose to drive if I can. But
No, I had a similar, not as, no, you're nowhere near as crazy as theirs, but I missed a flight and I was a kid. My mom and I were flying to Georgia. And so we flew from, I think, either San Jose or San Francisco to Phoenix. And we were in the airport, sitting right across from our gate, eating food, and still missed our flight.
Oh.
We were like sitting there, like waiting, like, okay, hey, they're gonna call our group. Like we're right next to the gate, so we should hear it. We heard nothing. Finished our food, walk over, like, did you guys already board? Like, yeah, they already flew off. Like, wait, what?
Oh.
Like, okay, well, we were supposed to be on the flight. What are we gonna do? So they had to put us up in a hotel and all that.
Man, it's like, and then like you find out that like what the last time I flew, like they were like calling this person for
Yeah,
like an hour while they're
that's what
trying to
gets
like,
me.
right? Like they didn't do that for you.
No, I'm like, what? We're right across. You could have just waved your hand and said, "Hey, it's time,"
Right?
and
Yeah.
we didn't see anything.
They knew it. It was a game that they're playing.
They just shrugged their shoulders. Ah, they don't
Yeah.
want to be here.
They look like they're fine there. They're
They're
enjoying the
eating. They're enjoying it. They'll get the
food.
next one tomorrow.
But in the movie, I also had the same question of like the moment you saw John Candy's character, it goes to that first motel scene where they they show up at a motel. It's John Candy. John Candy's buddy, or like he sold this motel guy the rings to their shower curtain, so he needed like a good kind of like payback for that or something, or like a bump for that. But
Yeah.
so so they agree to stay at the motel. They had the idea of like staying in two separate rooms, but so somehow the motel only had one room and it was one bed. And so I don't know anybody, we're typical college people, and also like we're not too shy of sharing a bed together,
Yeah.
because it's like, hey, if you gotta sleep, just go to sleep.
But the
But
butt.
uh but this one, but when what I'm asking to, or what I'm trying to get to, is that when John Candy's sitting there and he pulls out that framed photo of some woman,
Mhm.
um, did you automatically assume that the story would turn out? And this is where it kind of gets into where it's like you later learn that John Candy's wife, or past wife, has already passed away and stuff for a few years. So what do you think he's doing? Like, two questions. Did you already
Yeah.
assume that she was probably gone and that he was going to have like this sad
No.
story? No,
Yeah, no. I kind of assumed he was trying to get back. He didn't mention kids or anything, but I still assumed he was trying to get back to his wife.
I don't know why. I don't know why. I immediately assumed that she was dead. I was like sitting there. I was
Oh,
like, she's
damn.
probably dead.
Goodness.
And but 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 I'm like, yeah, it. I was pretty certain, but yeah, it's like it can be a 50-50 where like he's just trying to get home to his wife, as Steve Martin's character is too. He's trying to get home to his wife, his children, and stuff, and a typical Thanksgiving get together that probably most of us are going to be dealing with, not dealing with, but somewhat dealing with, trying to get home for, or get back home to the family, kind of like epicenter of
Hmm.
where you all kind of came from. But uh another question is that when you find out that his wife is dead and gone,
Yeah.
where is he going? Like, where was he going in the first place?
I was wondering that, honestly, because I wasn't, I expected him. I knew Steve Martin was going to go back to find him because they had the whole 80s montage of like, look at all these wonderful times we had, even though
Mm-hmm.
we know so much BS happened and it was hectic for them to even get to the train station. Um, but I knew he was going to go back. I figured John Candy was still going to be on the platform, actually, not in the subway station.
Mm.
But I don't know. I guess he was just going to spend his Thanksgiving in the subway station because he never talked about home. He just kind of showed the photo of his wife, and then you find out his wife passed. So I don't know. He never talked about family.
Which, if you make it think, if you make it, if that's the idea, then you probably assume that John Candy's character is homeless or houseless and stuff.
To a certain extent. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But maybe that's why he has like that giant trunk of stuff, and that never, it falls off the car, like rolls down the road and everything, and never
Goodness
breaks
gracious.
open. Like during the time when things were made correctly. So
Yeah.
but that's what I was thinking. I was like, if this guy's going, nowhere. Where is he going? Like,
Yeah.
granted, he's a
Just
traveling salesman.
traveling, just like I'm along for
Yeah,
the ride the whole time.
yeah, and there were those people, and I'm assuming there's probably still those people. I had a family friend that she was like a an appliance sales rep, and she would fly everywhere across the globe, and I'm like, whoa, like you're selling appliances and you're traveling all this much, and like you would think like nowadays like people are just like set up in like a brick and mortar store like in their local neighborhood or kind of city, but no, I think I don't know if I misunderstood like what their grand scale of like their employment was, like were they like a national or like a global salesperson? But but yeah, maybe he's a salesman that needs to get to his next sales spot, and that's what
Yeah.
he's really traveling to.
Like,
Um
he might just have a bunch of shower curtain rings in that bin or in that that
you're
trunk.
true, right? You never know.
Well, because the one of the scenes that I thought was hilarious was him selling the rings to different people as
Yeah.
earrings and like giving it a crazy backstory.
Yeah.
Oh,
Which
Prince
is
signed these, or
yeah, what was it? One of them was this is signed Daryl Strawberry
yes,
something.
that's the one. Yes,
Yeah, which is like the typical like you just gotta if you gotta sell something, you be truthful as much as to your extent, but you can
yeah.
elaborate on that
And
truth
there was
too.
no signature on it.
Yeah, I
Is the
know.
part that
Like,
got me. I'm like, you can
who
look at it
buys
and
a
say
shower
no
curtain with
signature.
this, or like even anything? Like, who buys an earring with a signature on it too?
Yeah. Who's gonna ever see it except for you?
Yeah, right.
That's not a way to start a conversation. You know, Daryl Strawberry signed these. Like,
Yeah,
what?
look at my earring. Get real close to my face.
Did someone draw a line on that? No, that's Daryl Strawberry's signature. It's like, I don't know.
Man, what
Yeah,
we're talking so much about the movie. Granted, the movie ends up turning into where it's like
it was a happy
they
ending.
it's a happy ending.
Mm,
They re one last question before we kind of move on to like
yeah,
possibly what we didn't like. One last question is there's a point where they kind of separate, and Steve Martin kind of or tells John Candy's character that like I think it's better that we separate and
yeah.
travel alone because they can do better by themselves to Steve Martin's understanding. But I was telling my girlfriend next to me, I was like, literally Steve Martin would not be where he was at that moment without John Candy.
Oh yeah.
So like he would not go anywhere. And granted, it did turn into that where like Steve Martin couldn't get anywhere without the help of John Candy.
Hmm.
But as like it's kind of like crazy to assume they like, oh yeah, like I can do so much better. Where like everything before that was done by John Candy. John Candy had a person that he sold these rings to, and or he knew a buddy, he knew a friend of a friend and stuff. You
Yeah,
always need that person in your life that like knows everyone around the city, because it's like if you need help, that person knows anybody that can give you that help.
yeah.
But yeah,
One,
so
I kept anytime music would start playing because a lot of the movie was just the dialogue.
mhm.
So anytime music would play, I would laugh because it felt so 80s. They just triggered me to think about Beverly Hills Cop. I'm like, this freaking sounds like a Beverly Hills Cop song.
Yeah, when he's like coming out of the when he's like yelling at that car rental person, and then he comes
Yes.
out of the airport, it's all like a bunch of scratching of records and stuff. It seemed so odd. It seemed like an odd placement of like music at that
Yeah.
moment.
But that's how
Where
Beverly Hills Cop felt. Like they're having a whole car chase and there's just music blasting. It's like, well, no, you should be firing guns,
yeah,
not
right.
having some jolly 80s song play right now.
I wonder if they have it where like they're all sitting there in the editing room, and Johnny from whoever worked on Beverly Hills Cop, like that needs a little bit of music right there. We got some in the back. We'll give you some.
We need a musical number right
Yeah.
here.
But I guess that coincides with what didn't you like about this movie?
I didn't like the fact that they were only a few states over. Like Chicago and New York aren't that far from each other, but it took them so long to get to Chicago.
Yeah, it did seem kind of I don't know back then maybe, but it did seem kind of unrealistic because it took him like
Yeah.
3 days, I think.
Yeah. Like I think it's a 2 hour drive, maybe 3 hour drive. And it took you that long to get there.
Yeah,
3 days. Like, come on.
yeah. The plane gets rerouted, a train blows up or something, or like the
Yeah.
entire steam engine decides to stop working. Uh, but it is interesting where it's like that. That is a kind of like a that is a downside. I don't know.
Explode a car. Like, come on.
Right? And they still somehow drive it. They
Yeah.
ram that broken car into a motel lobby
Oh
and
my
then drive
goodness.
away. It's like
And then drive away like nothing just happened.
yeah, and then get pulled over by a cop because none of their stuff works, and then
Hmm.
get pulled over by a cop. It gets towed to the local police station, and then somehow John Candy has a buddy that has a big rig that takes him all the way to Chicago. Like the series of events of like in that moment that could have
No, was
been
that?
like several hours.
Yeah, exactly. Is that when they were in the back of that truck,
Where
the,
yeah,
the
where
flatbed?
the
Like,
no, it was at the end. It was like how they got to Chicago. It was like they get pulled
oh,
over
that's
by the
right.
cop.
Because they were in the back of that truck before that
Yeah. That was how
with the
they got to
gloves
the
when Steve
train
Martin tried to
station.
grab the.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's how they got to the train station. But towards the end, it's like somehow John Candy gets like a big rig driver or truck driver to like give them a ride to. But then he was just gonna be like their cars impounded and all that stuff. You would think there's some stuff that you need to do at the police station, like they don't just
Yeah.
let you go.
You can't just cross state lines. Like, what?
Yeah, I don't know, but
How
so
do they
yeah,
pay for stuff? Like, that was
yeah,
the
they
part that
like
was like, really? You lost, Steve Martin lost $700. John Candy lost two, what do
do
you say,
something.
246?
Yeah, and like
He's like, if
15
it's a
cents or
dollar
something.
over, I stole your money.
And it was funny because it's funny seeing the times that we live in because literally our phone is our wallet sometimes. Our phone
Yeah.
is our money. And and back then it was like when everyone carried cash with them, they carried
Hmm.
hundreds of dollars sometimes because you never know what's gonna
Sounds
happen.
so dangerous.
Right. It reminds me of I tell everyone when my grandfather was still alive, and before he kind of like was going down the route of forgetting a lot of things, he would carry fifties and hundreds in his front pocket. And there was one time we went to a local market to go buy some my grandfather wanted specific milk from this woman at this market. And so and then we drive, it's me, my dad, and my grandfather. My dad was like, all right, like I'm not paying for the milk. You give me some money. And my grandpa hands him over a 50. and and he's like, you only want like 2 gallons of milk. Like this lady's not gonna have change for $50. He's like, that's all I got.
But that's like that joke everyone makes. Like, once you make a certain amount of money, you don't know how much regular things cost. It's like, oh, what? Milk's like a gallon of milk's $10, $30.
Right. We're all hoping to win the lotto tonight with the Powerball. So it's like when I'm a billionaire, I'm gonna forget how much everything costs. But I think I don't know. I couldn't really find anything that's like wrong with it.
No,
Right,
no, no, no.
like there it's a movie. You kind of know what you're like getting into
Hmm.
when you like start the movie. It's gonna be slapstick comedy. It's gonna be just two buddies just driving down the road and stuff, and it's something that's easy to watch. It's easy. I was just sitting around. We watched it early. We had our dinner during it and stuff, and you can follow along and not be worried that you're gonna miss something if you blink your eyes. Nowadays, a lot of movies are like that, where it's like you if you miss something, you're like, oh, you're screwed. You need to rewatch the movie again.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
No, but this one was like, it was a easy to watch, feel good movie. There was nothing, yeah, there was nothing you could dislike about it.
yeah, it kind of it did not motivate me to do anything afterwards. I played video games afterwards, but
Yeah. I went to the
but
movie theater afterwards.
he went to the movie theaters. He watched another movie.
Yeah. I'm
uh,
addicted.
But it goes to show you that we're not lying in terms of like we probably don't watch enough movies as like most like really big movie buffs, but we watch a decent amount that it's like we want to keep track of it in apps and stuff and talk about it and stuff, and that's the reason why it kind of led us down this route of at least just recording ourselves for 30 minutes and stuff and hoping someone listens.
Yeah,
So but that's sort of the name of the game for us right now. Um, but typically, our last question is, especially with these movies, our last question is I'm going to ask Kai right now. Would you add planes, trains, and automobiles to your movie collection?
I would. I would.
Yeah, I same
Yeah, I
here.
enjoy that.
I will. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm definitely gonna buy a copy of it just to like kind of have on a shelf and everything because especially during these times. We watched it because it's a November story. It's about going home for Thanksgiving and stuff. It's November 5th right now, and that's the reason why we watched it. But it's like it's probably one of those perpetual movies that you can watch every November, or just something
Yeah.
just to watch it. Like you just want to put it on in the background while you're like cooking some dinner and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It's one, like you said before, like it's one you don't have to pay attention to every single second of it. You
Yeah,
can like
true,
walk out the room and come back and still like catch jokes as they happen.
true, true. But all right. I think that's it for us today. We will have a new podcast for next week. We're gonna think about a new movie to watch. I
No, I think
think
we're doing that Willie
next
Mays
week,
documentary.
yeah, I think next week's we have a sports fanatic, or what you can kind of say as uh um a person that enjoys sports probably way too much than his wife wants to have him enjoy, but we're gonna watch the new Willie Mays documentary. I think it's Say Hey Willie Mays.
Yeah.
It's gonna be on HBO Max. We're gonna watch it and we're gonna break it down and kind of discuss it with our buddy Nick, who enjoys everything Giants baseball, everything sports, everything. He is a person that loves the numbers of baseball, trading cards when we were younger, probably still now today. Um, so it's everything baseball next week, and it's going to be a special episode of was it Sunday Morning Hangover?
Yeah.
We might have some pints with us, I guess. All
Yeah, I'm down for that.
right. Should we take them out?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
So thank
right.
you for joining us for another episode of Saturday Night Popcorn. I'm Jason.
And I'm Kai, and we'll be back next week for another one.
Thank you.